We have to have our facts straight. You have to do your due diligence and you have to prepare for a conversation. And really, you can express your displeasure about a situation in the same voice that you can pay a compliment. Okay, so there's no reason to get, loud, but asking questions, getting clarity and really just working with the facts. In advance of that, you've really got to know who you're talking with. And that's when I talked about understanding who the power.
Hello. Welcome to another Knowledge Boom episode of Lead to Greatness, where we believe in helping others reach their greatest potential and together change the world. Today on Lead to Greatness, we have Brenda Harrington. If this is your first time joining us, please consider subscribing and hit that notification bell and hit that like button. This will be greatly appreciated in helping getting out this content to great leaders and great individuals like yourself. Brenda is a certified executive coach and facilitator of leadership development experiences. She worked with leaders in private, public, nonprofit, government, economic development, and human rights organizations to help them advance their leadership, competency, and build capacity. Her partnership with clients is centered on the development of professional habits that we engage that will enable them to have the greatest possible impact. She is an author and #1 Amazon.com bestseller of her amazing book, Access Denied, which addresses disparities and discrimination. Please help me welcome Brenda with Positive Approach on Addressing Workplace Discrimination.
Cedric Francis, and you're listening to Lead to Greatness.
Not a conversation for anyone to get upset or anyone to get on the defense. It's for you to just think and just reconsider, some of the things that each and every one of us, all colors, the things that we have in our minds, the way blacks see whites, the way whites see blacks, the way Hispanics and Asians, all the way we see each other, just really getting to understand each other. I think that will create a better world for us all.
I am an executive coach. I have the privilege of working with global leaders to help them become the best version of themselves. I have had 30 plus years experience in industry, in private industry, primarily in different sectors of the real estate industry. Wow. And I established my practice, Adaptive Leadership Strategies, just about 12 years ago, when I affirmed, based on experiences, that when you get the people part right in an organization, amazing things can happen. And so as I was thinking about the last chapter of my professional life, I decided that that's where I wanted to spend my time. And I'm very grateful that I was able to do that. And I enjoy every minute of it.
Wow. You said getting the people right. What does that look like? And why is that so important?
Not to date myself, but I started working at a time when we really were in a very hierarchical place when it came to leadership and authoritative approach to leading people and leading projects. And it was really just about getting the work done, almost transactional. And we didn't really think as much about relationships and, personal interactions. And I'm so glad that we have evolved away from that, because honestly, you really have to begin with the people who do the work. And so when you focus on the relationships and the competencies and the strengths and the interests, it really creates such a different environment. Higher engagement, greater productivity and output, coalescing ideas. It's a more holistic approach.
Right. You talked about, the being in that environment versus being in this environment. I want you to kind of talk about the transition in someone that maybe, let's say, a baby boomer, for example, certain mindset. Of course, they're evolving and changing. But what are some things for someone that's still, and I know we're in 2023, but that's someone right now maybe still on the fence about this transition. I want you to speak to that individual, explain to them why, because of what you've seen then and what you see now. Why is transitioning and change is so important?
That question is so near and dear to my heart. I'm a baby boomer, okay? And I was an undergraduate in the 1970s. Okay. Wow. So I think about all of those things that I learned, when I was in college and in my early stages of career. And as relevant as it was then, it has very little relevance now.
Mm.
And I think of a time where there was a pretty specific continuum.
Mm.
You're educated, you go to work, you retire, right? We're in a different place now, and we've all got to commit to lifelong learning. The world has changed and is changing at a very rapid pace, and it's
Yeah.
changing so fast. So many
Yeah.
things are different. And I think it's wonderful to see people work into their 60s, 70s, 80s, and beyond if they want to, but they've got to be committed to lifelong learning.
Mm.
They've got to be willing to, reinvent themselves in some cases and just be open to new ideas and different ways of doing things. And I will respectfully say to my contemporaries who may be listening to this, I think it's great that you're still here and that you want to contribute,
Yeah.
but you have to be willing to look at things differently. I understand that there's a lot of fear associated with that because it's hard when you are 40, 50, 60 to feel like it's your first day, okay, and to really feel like you're starting from the beginning.
Yeah.
But you have to be willing to look that fear in the face and get on the other side of it.
But you're already starting with knowledge bomb. That is good. And I definitely love this. I want you to maybe somewhere down the line, I want you to share a story, a time when you faced a leadership challenge, whether it was with you personally or a leader that you worked for, and how did you overcome that situation or circumstance?
Yeah. One of my earliest leadership challenges was with my first job out of
Mm.
college. I was with Mobil Oil, wasn't even ExxonMobil in those days,
Wow.
right? And I was in a management development program. I forget what we used to call it back then, but basically, I was responsible for supervising and managing people who were way older than me, much my senior, had been with the company probably longer than I had been alive. And, there was a lot of resentment. They didn't take me seriously. And, initially I felt like I had to, what do they say? Fake it till you make it, right? And the reality is, listen, I was 20 years old, 21 years old. What could I have known, really?
Mm.
And so I realized that the only way that that was going to work for me and for them was for me to just be me. And that's when I really embraced the idea of authenticity
Yeah.
and just really being myself and allowing people to get to know me, my values, and just to approach it from a different way. A lot of resistance. There wasn't great acceptance for that in those days, but fast forward, it's pretty commonplace now, and it's one of the things that I incorporate into my coaching approach. Actually, one of the most important things, in my opinion, when it comes to effective leadership is authenticity and the ability to develop a capacity for influence. People can see through through stuff, right?
Absolutely.
And so it's pretty obvious, when you're showing up as someone you're not, or you're trying to imitate or emulate, someone else.
Yeah.
And so I think that we spend a lot of time, talking about what somebody needs to learn, or what they need to improve on, what their weaknesses are, which my clients know is not a term that I use. I talk about challenges and opportunities, but we all have strengths and we all have gifts. And all we have to do is be willing to embrace those.
Yes.
And really figure out how to cultivate them and use those things as our core, as our superpower, right? And it's scary to do that. It's really hard for some people to feel comfortable for whatever reason. The messages they've gotten over time, the voices in their head, whatever it is. But there's nothing more important than really focusing on the development and the cultivation of your personal leadership style.
Okay, 79. So here you are going into the 80s, an African American woman going into the workforce. And back in the 80s versus now, times is a little different. And I mean, there's things going on, which, we're going to get more into, but how did you go into the workforce back in the 80s? How did you go into this workforce and go into it without developing hatred? And I'm pretty sure you had moments of anger, but I mean, how did you get through those times going into the 80s?
There was a degree of acceptance back in those days for certain things.
Yeah.
And I certainly had a spidey sense, I'll say, about some things. And my first encounter or my first experience in corporate America, I realized that it didn't seem like a fit for me, but I really wasn't sure what that was about. When I looked around me, I didn't see a lot of people who looked like me. What was really interesting to me is that the people who did look like me were not in positions like the one that I had been moved into, right?
Yeah.
And so, kind of feeling like that token, that only one. And I really observed the people who were advancing and moving forward in the organization and similar organizations. And I really had to ask myself some hard questions. Is that someone who you can or are willing to become? And really the answer was no. And so I left Vogel and I went to work for AT&T. And things were a little bit different, but not markedly. But it was that point, and for many reasons, I realized that probably was not the type of environment where I wanted to spend 40 years, 30 or 40 years of my working life, because it would require me to become someone that I was not.
Absolutely.
Going back to this commitment to authenticity. The code switching, we didn't call it that in those days, all of the things that you had to do to kind of succumb to that environment. With all due respect, there are a lot of folks, a lot of brothers and sisters who've been very, very successful in corporate America, but it was not something I felt was for me.
Yes. Let's talk about access denied. What inspired you to write this book and why?
Yeah. So I'm sure you and everybody else are tired of hearing about this, but the reality is the spring of 2020 and the events of 2020 hit me like a loud call to action. And it's not so much that I was so surprised by the things that were happening, but just a few minutes ago, sir, you reflected on, you asked me about the 1980s and some of the challenges I faced. And what hit me in the spring of 2020 in a big way was that so much of the things that were going on in the 1980s were still going on, and perhaps in a more pervasive and impactful way. That's one thing. The second thing is that I didn't feel that the young people that I was talking to, even people who were my contemporaries, were any better prepared to address some of those challenges than we were back in the 1980s, right. which is really heartbreaking in a way for me. And so, when I thought about writing a book, which is not something I had ever considered prior to that time, I wanted it to be a tool. I didn't want it to be a, kind of somebody done me wrong kind of thing, right? We all have stories to tell. Yeah. But I wanted it to be a resource and a tool so that people could help to have something to use to reflect, to think about their own circumstances, perhaps see themselves in the stories that were being told, but also prepared to make different choices, to set different expectations, and to think about their options differently. So many times I have these conversations with people and they feel that they don't have a choice because they need the job and they need the this. And I get that. I get that. We've all got to be stewards of our own lives. Yeah. But I think that we've got to be strategic in the way we approach our professional lives, whether we're employees, whether we're entrepreneurs, whatever the case. You've got to develop a strategy. And that's where I think we miss the mark sometimes. We do all the things we're supposed to do.
Okay.
We go to college, we get advanced degrees, we get the certifications, we get into the workforce and we start to develop experience. And we feel that we're going to be considered and treated just like our counterparts. In most cases, not all, but in most cases, I don't believe that that's a realistic expectation. And so the first thing we've got to do is set the right expectations, okay? And what that means is when you go to work for an organization, your day job is what you were hired to do, what your job description says, right? Your side hustle is really reading the room. What is the culture telling you? What kind of behavior is not only tolerated, but rewarded and recognized, okay? Look around. How many people who look like you are in senior level position? What types of positions, okay? The introduction to my book, I say, two things. First of all, we begin justifying, well, maybe I need to get another degree. Well, maybe I should have done this differently. Well, first of all, You're not crazy. What's happening to you is real. So, we're always thinking that we're misunderstanding what's going on. There's a little
Absolutely.
gaslighting going on sometimes, right?
Absolutely.
And the second thing that's really important is that you are not alone,
Mm,
because it's a very lonely place to be when you're
yeah.
going through some of these things.
Right.
Okay. And clearly we're laser focused on the paycheck and the compensation, because we have not had the benefit of amassing generational wealth.
Yeah.
Okay. So any opportunity we get, even though our compensation, as rich as it may appear to be, is a percentage of what some of our counterparts are earning, right?
Hmm.
But the most important thing is to pay attention to every interaction. And when you feel that you're being disrespected, if you feel that, a microaggression at play or something like
Yeah.
that, you need to address that,
Yeah.
because you can't miss an opportunity. Because anytime that you are silent, okay, anytime that you don't respond to something like that, you're sending a message that it's okay. Okay.
Mm,
You're sending a message that it's okay. And it doesn't mean you have to be rude. It doesn't mean you have to be disrespectful. You should have a conversation about it. You do need to talk about it. So what was the intent? Or, help me understand, how this played out, or, what is the reason that this is happening or this didn't happen?
mm,
And a lot of times we let these things go, and then they just continue to go. And we get
yeah.
we get in the habit. We train ourselves to be accepting of these
Yeah.
things, and you can't let it go.
And you talked about the approach. And sometimes, because of our anger, because of our frustration, that we can approach the situation in a way where everybody around get on the defense. And it's like that extremely aggressive approach. It really don't help. It really don't help, because now you come in at aggressive. And first of all, one thing I've learned as an African American man is there's stereotypes, right? Black people are angry, black people are loud, black people are, this and that. And when I walk into the room and not going at it intelligently and just going smooth off, like we on the street corner, I'm making the stereotype seems real,
Right,
although it's still false based off, my hurt or my disappointment. I am exactly what they heard I am. So I
right.
want I want you to kind of share, with a approach. What are some approaches that we can take towards going into these rooms? What are some approaches before we have this meeting? What are some ways we can approach this differently?
Well, first of all, we have to have our facts straight. You have to do your due diligence, and you have to prepare for a conversation. And really, you can express your displeasure about a situation in the same voice that you can pay a compliment.
Yeah,
Okay, so there's no reason to get, loud, but asking questions,
yeah,
getting clarity, and really just working with the facts. In advance of that, you've really got to know who you're talking with, understanding who the power players are, and kind of where people stand. That's really job one when you start at an organization. You really need to start reading and interpreting that culture.
wow.
Okay. I think though, and I talk about this in the book, we talk about the importance of mentorship. I think that beyond mentorship, we all need to have our own little board of advisors.
Mm,
Okay. One mentor is great, but I think that you need to have the benefit of different perspectives, points of view, that people that you can talk about things with, even people that you might not feel as comfortable with, but will be truthful with you, even when you're not ready to hear the truth, right?
yeah.
And so it's more of a process, but I think you can have a conversation and not just let things go. But it's really important to do your homework.
Here's the thing, because I actually seen this happen before too. Someone that may have had bad experience at another company, and now it's kind of natural to do too, where you begin to generalize everything and every individual. All Caucasian people are the same, and all blacks are the same, all Hispanics. We begin to generalize certain people based on our past experience. I want you to have you ever seen that, or have a story to share or something to relate towards that? And what are some things that we can do to avoid those things as well? Because sometimes those past experiences can keep us from advancing in our right now, even if we're in a better situation in this season of our life.
Yeah. it happens all the time. It's like PTSD, right?
Yeah.
And I think that we have to use those bad experiences as learning opportunities, learning experiences
Yeah.
to inform the next experience.
Mm.
So you don't want to take that baggage with you,
Yeah.
but you do, it does help you to gain greater insight. So perhaps, on the front end, you ask different questions, or you pay attention to different things, or you really have a different filter, okay? Because you can certainly test some things to determine what you're experiencing is the same or is happening for different reasons, or you need to check yourself because you've got some carryover from the previous situation.
Mm.
But I do think coming out of a bad situation, and I have this conversation with clients a lot when they're thinking about transitioning to a different role or a different company or whatever it is, what questions would you ask now that you didn't ask before? And based
Wow.
on this, yeah, based on what you're coming out of, what scenarios and contextual questions can you raise? Get some insight into how the next or the new organization would approach a particular situation.
Your book, Access Denied. Who is this book for, and why should they read it?
There are two audiences. The primary audience for me is the young people primarily who are coming up through corporate America, who are facing challenges and are at a loss for how to address them.
Mm.
Okay. So the earlier you get started on this and not spend 10, 15, 20 years for somebody to recognize you, acknowledge you, okay, and the more you take control over that by developing a strategy, the sooner you can start working toward a more desirable outcome. So
Mm.
that's audience one. The secondary audience really are members of the dominant group, I'll say, and perhaps organizations who are sincere and committed to learning more about the work-life experiences of people who don't look like them. I've had
Absolutely.
so many people come to me and say, I had no idea, I didn't realize, and this happened, and I remember that, but now I'm seeing it differently.
Yeah.
Because they don't understand. They don't know what it's like to be the only person, okay, the only minority on a team or in an organization trying to make everybody else feel comfortable. Because for some reason, if there are two of us, they think it's a mob, right? All of a
Mm.
sudden, but just the impact. I remember being the only Black person in an environment on the management or senior leadership team, and the only other people in the organization that looked like me were not managers, but it was frowned upon
Yeah.
for me to interact with people that I had more in common with socially,
Yeah.
right? Okay, so things like that, and it just really, there's so many fractures. There's
Mm.
so many fractures, and then when you are you think you're accepted, okay, you're in an environment where they really decide, well, you're different than them. No, I'm no
Yes.
different, right?
Yes.
I'm the little Black girl from Mount
Yes.
Vernon, New York, okay? And
Yes.
regardless of what it says on my card or who you've decided I am, that's who I am at the core, okay?
Yes.
But they forget about that. They forget about that. And you begin to hear and see things that you should never be exposed to. And there's some stories in the book about that. And so, as I said, I wanted it to be a resource. It's
Yeah.
for people how to learn how to make different choices, whatever side they're on. It's to create awareness.
I think, and I do get the reason why, companies and organizations don't want to, like, religion, politics, and things like that. We're encouraged not to talk about these things in workplaces. I think maybe a safe environment to do so. I think the environment may have to be controlled by someone that has wisdom, but I think the aspect of us not talking about these things, we're having the elephant in the room and we're not dealing with the problems, and everybody kind of holding these things in. It's like, okay, I'm a Black man, you're a white man, and we go to lunch together, but certain issues we can't talk about, but we both have things we're curious about. And I love this, the questions. It's like, these are the moments when I think we can really understand each other. That was a great book I read. the 7 habits of highly effective people. And
Mm-hmm.
one of the habits was to understand before being understood. And I think this is a big problem in politics. I think this is a big problem going across cultures is we don't understand each other. We
Right.
don't understand each other. It's like me as a Black man, I don't want to hear your perspective and you don't hear my perspective. And that's a problem. And it's like we're tolerating each other, but we're really not living in harmony together. And get the book Access Denied, just to really consider and having a different view on how to attack these issues and how to attack these conversations that we tend not to deal with. And I have to say, I really thought going through, let's say 2010 all the way to 2019 or 2017, I personally thought as a Black man that us here in America, that was a big difference. But I'm telling you, when, our former president came into office, I mean, that was a lot of, people let their hair down. People took all the stuff out of their pocket that they've been keeping in their pocket. I was on LinkedIn and I seen things and read things that I was like, what in the world is going on? Things I never thought I would ever see in my lifetime. People that, I'm telling you, people I've been to lunch with, people I've been, played golf with, and all these different things. It's just some of the views that was said. It was heartbreaking. It was heartbreaking. It was like, wow. Because I'm like, man, we spend a lot of time together and you feel this way about it. It was really a gut wrenching, but I think I didn't get upset about it. Well, I got upset about it, but I didn't build any hatred about it. But I think this is a good time for a conversation. Go ahead.
But you see, this goes back to what I said about, people you had played golf with and had lunch with and thought you had a collegial relationship with. They somehow saw you, they accepted you as being different from all those other people. That's stereotype, right?
Absolutely.
Number one. Number two is, it's like meeting people again for the first time, right? Good. And they might not have felt comfortable before, that period in our history about, really speaking to their values. The genie's out of the bottle now, though. The genie is out of the bottle.
Absolutely.
And we're learning a lot more about beliefs. I think that there are some people, unfortunately, that have an inherent belief that because you look a certain way, because your skin is a certain color, that you're inferior, that you're not as intelligent, that you're not as capable, okay? And that plays out in every aspect of our lives. And people don't like to hear that. People frown upon the term systemic racism, but if you live it, you get it.
Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely.
If you live it, you get it. And it doesn't matter how intelligent you are. It doesn't matter how well spoken you are. It doesn't matter how many degrees you have or what you've accomplished. You've always got to prove that you belong. Okay. I am, forget how old I am, but the point is, I didn't just graduate from high school. And some of the conversations I still have with people are mind numbing. They're so curious. And I get to a point, I just say, well, come on out and ask me what it is you want to know. Just what is it, because they just don't believe. And it's unfortunate.
Brenda, this has been an amazing conversation. I'm definitely hope the Lead to Greatness community has gathered great value with this conversation. So thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for the project and everything that you're doing on your end.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure talking with you. You got me all excited here today about this.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if someone wanted to connect with you and what you're doing and also your book, where should they go?
My email address is bharrington@adaptiveleadershipstrategies.com. I'm on Instagram as author B Harrington, and I'm certainly on LinkedIn. Okay. The book is available on Amazon, at barnesandnoble.com, Books A Million, and wherever books are sold, basically. The website for the book, and all of the retail links are there, is access-denied.net. That's www.access-denied.net.
On behalf of the Lead to Greatness community, I want to thank you so very much for taking time out of your busy schedule.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, thank you.
We want to thank you for joining us today on the Lead to Greatness podcast. So remember, if you help others reach their greatest potential, together we can change the world. Peace.